My name is Sarah Chen, and I run a small bakery called Sweet Memories in downtown Portland, Oregon. At 32, I thought I had my life figured out. Wake up at 4 a.m., prep the morning pastries, serve regular customers who knew my name, and close shop by 6 p.m. It was predictable, comfortable, and exactly what I needed after years of chaos in my 20s. The rain was coming down hard that Tuesday evening in November, drumming against the large windows of my bakery. I was wiping down the last of the tables when I heard a gentle knock on the glass door. Through the streaks of water, I could see a figure hunched under a worn black umbrella. "We're closed," I called out, pointing to the sign that clearly displayed our hours. But the person knocked again, more insistently this time. I sighed and walked to the door, my sneakers squeaking against the polished concrete floor. The smell of cinnamon and vanilla still hung in the air from the day's baking, a comforting aroma that usually made me feel at peace. Not tonight, though. I just wanted to go home, take a hot shower, and watch something mindless on Netflix. When I unlocked the door and opened it a crack, I saw a young man, maybe 19 or 20, with dark hair plastered to his forehead from the rain. His jeans were soaked, and his thin jacket looked like it had seen better days. "Ma'am, I'm sorry to bother you," he said, his voice shaky from the cold. "I know you're closed, but I really need to talk to you. My name is Marcus Rodriguez, and I think you might be my sister." I felt my heart skip a beat. The words hit me like a physical blow, and I had to grip the door frame to steady myself. "I'm sorry, what?" "I know this sounds crazy," Marcus continued, water dripping from his hair onto the welcome mat. "But I have something that belongs to you. Something you wrote a long time ago. Every instinct told me to close the door, to protect myself from whatever emotional hurricane this stranger was about to bring into my carefully ordered life. I had built my world brick by brick after aging out of foster care, and I wasn't about to let some random person tear it down with wild claims. But something in his eyes stopped me. They were dark brown, almost black, and they held a vulnerability that I recognized. It was the same look I used to see in my own reflection during those long nights in foster homes, wondering if anyone would ever really want me. "Look, I don't know what kind of scam you're running," I started. "Please," he interrupted, reaching into his jacket pocket. "Just look at this." He pulled out a plastic bag, the kind used to protect important documents. Inside was a piece of paper that looked old and worn, with childish handwriting in purple crayon. My breath caught in my throat. Even from where I stood, I could see the distinctive way the letters were formed, the way the A looked like a backwards E, a quirk I'd had as a child that drove my elementary school teachers crazy. "Where did you get that?" I whispered. "Can I come in?" Marcus asked. "I promise I'm not here to hurt you or ask for anything. I just need to understand where I came from." The rational part of my brain was screaming at me to call the police, to slam the door shut and pretend this never happened. But that letter was pulling at something deep inside me, a memory I'd buried so deep I'd almost convinced myself it never existed. I stepped aside and let him in. Marcus shook his umbrella outside before entering, a small courtesy that somehow made me feel slightly more at ease. He looked around the bakery with wide eyes, taking in the exposed brick walls, the vintage display cases, and the chalkboard menu I'd painted myself. "This is beautiful," he said softly. "It smells like home should smell." Something about the way he said it made my chest tighten. I gestured to one of the small tables near the window. "Sit. I'll make us some coffee." As I moved behind the counter, my hands shook as I operated the espresso machine. The familiar routine of grinding beans and steaming milk usually calmed me, but tonight it felt like I was operating on autopilot while my mind raced. When I returned to the table with 2 steaming mugs, Marcus had placed the plastic bag on the wooden surface between us. The letter inside seemed to glow under the warm light of the pendant lamp hanging above our heads. "My adoptive parents gave this to me when I turned 18, Marcus said, wrapping his hands around the mug for warmth. "They said it was found in my belongings when I was placed in the system. I was only 3, so I don't remember much about my life before then." I stared at the letter, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "What makes you think I wrote it?" "I've been searching for years," he said. The letter mentions specific details: a bakery, a girl named Sarah who wanted to be a chef, someone who promised to always take care of their little brother. I hired a private investigator 6 months ago, and he traced it to you. The coffee tasted bitter on my tongue, but I forced myself to take another sip. The warmth spread through my chest, giving me courage to ask the question that terrified me most. What does it say? Marcus carefully opened the plastic bag and unfolded the letter. Even across the table, I could see the familiar purple crayon, the way the words were pressed so hard into the paper that they'd left indentations. "Dear Marcus," he read, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know you're probably scared right now, but I want you to know that your big sister Sarah loves you very much. I'm sorry I can't stay with you, but the social worker says I'm too young to take care of you. Someday, when I'm grown up, I'm going to open a bakery and make all your favorite cookies. I'm going to find you, and we're going to be a real family again. I promise. Love, Sarah. P.S. Don't forget to brush your teeth before bed." The words hit me like a tidal wave, bringing back memories I'd spent 20 years trying to forget. I remembered that night so clearly now. The fluorescent lights of the social services office, the way Marcus had clung to my leg as they explained that we'd be separated, the desperate way I'd scribbled that letter while he napped in the corner. I remembered his favorite cookies, too, snickerdoodles with extra cinnamon, the way his face would light up when I made them in our last foster home's kitchen. I remembered how he'd wrap his tiny arms around my waist and tell me I was the best cook in the world. Tears were streaming down my face now, and I didn't bother to wipe them away. "Oh my God," I whispered. "Marcus? My little Marcus?" His eyes filled with tears too, and he nodded. "I never stopped believing you'd find me. Even when everyone said I should give up hope, I kept this letter. I kept believing." I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor, and before I knew it, I was around the table, pulling him into a hug. He was so much taller than me now, but as his arms wrapped around me, I could feel that same little boy who used to fall asleep in my lap during movie nights. "I'm so sorry," I sobbed into his shoulder. "I'm so sorry I couldn't keep my promise. I tried to find you, but they sealed the records, and I was just a kid myself, and—" "Hey," Marcus said softly, pulling back to look at me. "You were 11 years old. You did everything you could. And look, you did open a bakery. You did become a chef. You kept half your promise." I laughed through my tears, a sound that was half joy, half hysteria. "Do you still like snickerdoodles?" "They're still my favorite," he admitted with a shy smile. "I actually learned to make them myself, but they never taste quite right. I always wondered if it was because I was missing some secret ingredient." "Love," I said without thinking. That was always the secret ingredient. We sat back down, neither of us able to stop staring at each other. I kept looking for traces of the little boy I remembered in this young man's face, and I found them, in the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, in the way he tilted his head when he was thinking. "Tell me about your life," I said. "Are you happy? Are your adoptive parents good to you?" Marcus's face brightened. "They're amazing. Maria and David Rodriguez. They adopted me when I was 5. David's a high school history teacher, and Maria works at the library. They couldn't have kids of their own, so they adopted 3 of us. I have 2 sisters now, Elena and Carmen. They're in college." "That's wonderful," I said, and I meant it. The relief that flooded through me was overwhelming. He'd been loved. He'd been safe. He'd had the family I desperately wanted to give him, but couldn't. "What about you?" he asked. "Are you married? Kids?" I shook my head. "Just me and the bakery. I guess I've always been afraid of getting too close to people, of having them leave." "I understand," Marcus said quietly. "I've had the same problem. Maria always says I have abandonment issues, but she says it with so much love that it doesn't hurt to hear." We talked for hours as the rain continued to fall outside. He told me about his childhood, Little League baseball, family camping trips, the way Maria would sing Spanish lullabies when he had nightmares. I told him about my journey through foster care, culinary school, and the years of saving every penny to open Sweet Memories. "Why did you name it that?" he asked as I locked up the bakery around midnight. I looked back at the sign. illuminated by the soft glow of the street lamp. Because I always believed that food should bring back good memories, even when I couldn't remember many good ones myself. Marcus smiled. Well, you're about to have a lot more good memories to work with. As I walked him to his car, a beat-up Honda that he'd apparently driven all the way from Sacramento, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not just for myself, but for the possibility that maybe, just maybe, I could have a real family after all. Will you come back tomorrow? I asked, suddenly terrified that this was all a dream, that I'd wake up alone in my apartment with nothing but the memory of this incredible night. Try to stop me, Marcus said, giving me another hug. I want to try those legendary snickerdoodles. As his taillights disappeared into the rainy Portland night, I stood on the sidewalk, holding that letter, my letter, in my hands. 21 years later, my little brother had found me. Or maybe I had found him. Either way, for the first time in decades, I wasn't alone anymore. I looked up at the dark sky, rain dropping onto my face, and smiled. Tomorrow, I would make snickerdoodles with extra cinnamon, and I would finally get to keep the promise I'd made to a scared little boy so many years ago. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm for the first time in months. Usually, getting out of bed at 4 a.m. was a struggle, but today I felt energized, like I had something important to live for beyond just opening the bakery and going through the motions. I arrived at Sweet Memories while it was still dark outside, but instead of my usual routine of mixing basic bread dough, I found myself pulling out my recipe book and flipping to the page I'd bookmarked with a sticky note years ago. Marcus's snickerdoodles. I'd written the recipe down from memory when I first opened the bakery, thinking that maybe someday I'd work up the courage to make them. But every time I'd considered it, the memories were too painful. Today, though, the pain was mixed with something else: anticipation. As I creamed the butter and sugar together, I found myself humming a lullaby that Maria Rodriguez used to sing to Marcus. Wait, how did I know that? He'd mentioned it last night, but I'd never heard it before. Yet somehow, the melody felt familiar, like something I'd always known. The morning rush was lighter than usual. Portland's November weather was keeping people indoors, but I barely noticed. I kept glancing at the door, wondering when Marcus would arrive. He'd said he was staying at a motel across town, but he hadn't given me a specific time. Around 10 a.m., as I was restocking the display case with fresh scones, I heard the bell above the door chime. I looked up to see Marcus walking in, but this time he wasn't alone. A middle-aged Latina woman was with him, her dark hair streaked with silver, and her kind eyes immediately scanning the bakery with the same appreciation Marcus had shown the night before. "Sarah," Marcus said, his voice nervous but excited. "I'd like you to meet my mom, Maria Rodriguez." "Mom, this is Sarah." My heart stopped. He'd brought his adoptive mother to meet me. I wasn't prepared for this. What if she didn't like me? What if she thought I was some kind of threat to their family? But Maria stepped forward with a warm smile and pulled me into a hug before I could overthink it. "Mija," she said softly, "I have been waiting 21 years to thank you." "Thank me?" I managed, my voice cracking slightly. "For taking care of my boy before I could," she said, pulling back to look at me. "Marcus has told me so much about you over the years. Every time he read that letter, he would talk about his big sister Sarah, who promised to take care of him. You were his hero long before he found you." Tears pricked at my eyes. I didn't do anything special. I loved him. "That's everything," Maria said firmly. "Love is everything." I led them to a table in the corner, the same one where Marcus and I had sat the night before. The morning light streaming through the windows made everything feel more real, more permanent. "I brought snickerdoodles," I said shyly, placing a small plate of the cookies on the table. "I made them from the recipe I remembered." Marcus picked one up and took a bite, closing his eyes as he chewed. A smile spread across his face. "These taste exactly like I remembered. How is that possible?" "Because you made them with love," Maria said, taking a bite herself. "Just like you did when you were children." "You know about that?" I asked, surprised. Maria nodded. "Marcus used to have dreams about baking cookies with his big sister. He would wake up and describe them in such detail, the way you would let him crack the eggs, how you would lift him up to reach the mixing bowls. Dr. Martinez, his therapist, said those were probably real memories. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. All those years, I'd wondered if Marcus remembered me at all. The thought that he'd carried those memories, even in his dreams, made my chest tight with emotion. "I remember that too," I whispered. "You were so small, but you insisted on helping with everything. You got flour everywhere." "He still does," Maria laughed. "I tried to teach him to make these cookies when he was in high school, but he said they never tasted right. Now I know why." As we sat there sharing cookies and stories, I began to understand something that had never occurred to me before. Marcus's adoptive family wasn't a replacement for me. They were an extension of the love I'd tried to give him. Maria and David had nurtured the seeds of security and affection that I'd planted in those early years. "I need to ask you something," I said to Maria, my voice hesitant. "Are you okay with this? With Marcus finding me? I don't want to disrupt your family." Maria reached across the table and took my hand. "Mija, you are family. You always have been. Marcus is my son, yes, but you are his sister. There's room in our hearts for both kinds of love. Besides," she added with a mischievous smile, "I've been dying to meet the woman who inspired my son to become such a good cook. He makes dinner for us every Sunday now, and he always says he learned from his sister Sarah." "You cook?" I asked Marcus, delighted. He blushed slightly. "I went to culinary school too, actually. I graduate next month with a degree in hospitality management. I've been working at a restaurant in Sacramento to get experience." My mouth fell open. "You're a chef?" "Well, trying to be," he said modestly. "I always wondered if it was genetic or if I just remembered watching you cook. Turns out it doesn't matter. I love it either way." "He's being modest," Maria interjected. "He's incredibly talented. The restaurant where he works has already offered him a sous chef position." I felt a surge of pride so intense it took my breath away. "That's amazing, Marcus. I'm so proud of you." The rest of the morning flew by as customers came and went, but Marcus and Maria stayed, helping me serve coffee and pastries. It felt natural, like they'd always been part of Sweet Memories. Maria charmed every customer with her warm personality, while Marcus seemed to instinctively know how to work the espresso machine. "You two are naturals at this," I told them during a brief lull. "It runs in the family," Maria said with a wink. "Marcus has been talking about opening his own restaurant someday. Maybe now he has someone to partner with." The suggestion hung in the air between us, full of possibility. I'd never considered expanding Sweet Memories or taking on a partner, but watching Marcus work alongside me felt right in a way I couldn't explain. Around 2 p.m., Maria excused herself to walk around downtown Portland, saying she wanted to give Marcus and me some time alone. As soon as she left, Marcus turned to me with a serious expression. "I need to apologize," he said. "For what?" "For bringing her without asking. I know this is all overwhelming, and I should have given you more time to process everything before introducing you to my family." I shook my head. "Marcus, I'm glad you brought her. She's wonderful. I can see why you turned out so well." "I was terrified she wouldn't like you," he admitted. "Not because there's anything wrong with you, but because I've been looking for you for so long, and I was afraid if she didn't approve, I'd have to choose. And now I know I don't have to choose. She loves you already. She told me this morning that she's been praying for years that you were happy and safe, wherever you were." The afternoon brought a steady stream of customers, and I found myself introducing Marcus as my brother to several regulars. Each time I said it, it felt more natural, more real. Mrs. Patterson, who came in every Tuesday for her usual blueberry muffin, was particularly delighted. "I've been telling you for years that you needed family," she said, patting my arm. "This young man has your eyes, dear. Same kindness in them." When the day finally wound down and I was cleaning the espresso machine, Marcus approached me hesitantly. "Can I ask you something personal?" he said. "Of course. Why didn't you ever try to find me? I mean, I know you were young, but when you got older..." I paused in my cleaning, considering how to explain something I'd never fully understood myself. "I was scared," I admitted. "Scared that you'd forgotten me. Scared that you had a good life and I'd mess it up by showing up." But mostly, I was scared that you'd hate me for not trying harder to keep us together. I could never hate you, Marcus said softly. You were just a kid yourself. You gave me everything you could. I should have kept fighting for you. Sarah, look at me, he said firmly. You were 11 years old. You did everything an 11-year-old could do. You wrote me a letter that kept me believing in love and family for 21 years. You gave me something to hope for when I had nothing else. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. I missed so much of your life. But we have the rest of it, Marcus said. If you want to be part of it, that is. Of course I do, I said without hesitation. I just don't know how to be a sister to an adult. I only know how to be a sister to a 3-year-old. Marcus laughed. Well, I only know how to be a little brother to an 11-year-old. I guess we'll figure it out together. As we locked up the bakery that evening, Marcus turned to me with a thoughtful expression. I have an idea, he said. What if I stayed in Portland for a few weeks? I could help you with the bakery during the day, and we could get to know each other again. I don't have to be back in Sacramento until after New Year's. What about your job? I already talked to my boss. He said I could take extended leave, especially when I explained the situation. He's actually excited about me learning new techniques from another chef. You'd really want to do that? Sarah, I've been looking for you my whole life. Now that I've found you, I don't want to waste any more time. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. I'd love that, but you're not staying in that motel. I have a guest room in my apartment upstairs. Are you sure? Marcus, we're family. Family doesn't stay in motels. As we walked up the narrow stairs to my apartment above the bakery, I felt like I was seeing my life through new eyes. The space that had always felt adequate for one person suddenly seemed full of possibilities. Maybe I'd finally found what I'd been searching for all these years without even knowing it. I was no longer just Sarah the baker. I was Sarah the sister. And that made all the difference. 3 weeks into Marcus's stay, Sweet Memories had transformed into something I'd never imagined it could be. The bakery that had once been my solitary refuge had become a warm, bustling hub of family activity. Marcus had proven to be not just a skilled baker, but a natural at customer service, remembering regular customers' names and preferences with an ease that had taken me years to develop. Mrs. Patterson's here, Marcus called out from the front counter as I pulled a tray of fresh croissants from the oven. She's asking if we have any of those lavender shortbread cookies you made yesterday. Tell her I saved her a dozen, I called back, wiping flour from my hands on my apron. They're in the blue tin behind the register. This had become our routine. Marcus handling the front while I managed the baking, though we often switched roles depending on what needed to be done. It felt natural, like we'd been working together for years instead of weeks. But it was the evenings that I treasured most. After closing, we'd sit in the apartment upstairs, sharing stories and slowly filling in the gaps of our separate lives. Marcus would tell me about family camping trips with the Rodriguez family, and I'd share memories of my various foster homes and the teachers who'd encouraged my love of baking. Tonight felt different, though. Marcus had been quieter than usual during the day, and I'd caught him staring out the window with a distant expression several times. Okay, spill, I said, as we settled onto my couch with mugs of hot chocolate. What's going on? You've been distracted all day. Marcus sighed, running his hands through his hair. I got a call from my boss in Sacramento. The restaurant is expanding, and they want me to come back early to help with the new location. It's a huge opportunity. They're talking about making me head chef. My heart sank, but I forced myself to smile. That's wonderful, Marcus. You should be excited. I am, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. It's just, I don't want to leave. These past few weeks have been the happiest I've ever been. I feel like I'm finally home. Portland isn't going anywhere, I said softly, and neither am I. We'll visit each other all the time. It's not the same, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. I just found you, Sarah. I don't want to go back to seeing each other a few times a year. I want to be part of your daily life, and I want you to be part of mine. I set down my mug and turned to face him fully. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to stay in Portland. I want to be your partner for real. I want to expand Sweet Memories and build something together. The words hung in the air between us, full of possibility and terror in equal measure. I'd spent so many years building my life around the assumption that I'd always be alone. The idea of sharing my business, my dreams, my daily routine with someone else was both thrilling and terrifying. "Marcus, that's a huge decision," I said carefully. "You'd be giving up a guaranteed job, a chance to run your own kitchen." "To build something with my sister," he interrupted. "Sarah, I've been thinking about this for weeks. I have some savings, and I could get a small business loan. We could expand the bakery, maybe add a full kitchen, start serving lunch and dinner. I have so many ideas." His enthusiasm was infectious, but I forced myself to think practically. "What about Maria and David? Sacramento is your home. They'd understand," Marcus said confidently. "Maria actually suggested it first. She said she's never seen me as happy as I've been these past few weeks. She thinks this is where I belong." I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the street below. Even at 10 p.m., there were people walking by, couples holding hands, friends laughing as they headed to nearby restaurants. Portland had always felt like a city of possibilities to me, but I'd never allowed myself to imagine possibilities that included other people. "I need to tell you something," I said, not turning around. "I've never had a business partner before. I've never even had a roommate as an adult. I don't know how to share control of something I've built from nothing." "You don't have to give up control," Marcus said gently. "This would be your bakery, your rules. I'd just be here to help make your dreams bigger. What if we fight? What if working together ruins what we've found? Then we'll figure it out," Marcus said. "Sarah, we're family. We've already survived being separated for 21 years. I think we can handle a few business disagreements." I turned back to him, studying his face. He looked so much like the little boy I remembered, but there was a confidence in his eyes now that came from years of being loved and supported by Maria and David. "Tell me about these ideas you have," I said, sitting back down. Marcus's face lit up. "Okay, so the space next door is about to become available. I talked to the landlord. We could knock through the wall, double our seating area, add a proper kitchen. I'm thinking we could do brunch on weekends, maybe dinner service Thursday through Sunday." "That's a huge expansion," I said, but I could feel excitement building in my chest despite my reservations. "I know, but think about it. Portland loves local restaurants. We already have a loyal customer base, and with my culinary background and your baking skills, we could create something really special." "What about the menu?" "That's the best part," Marcus said, pulling out his phone. "I've been working on some ideas. What if we did comfort food with a twist? Like your amazing sourdough but made into gourmet grilled cheese, or those snickerdoodles we made, but as the base for a bread pudding dessert." As he scrolled through photos and notes on his phone, I could see he'd been thinking about this seriously. There were sketches of plate presentations, lists of local suppliers, even rough financial projections. "Marcus, this is incredible," I said, genuinely impressed. "You've really thought this through." "I've had a lot of time to think while I've been here," he said. "Every morning when I wake up and smell the bread baking, every time I see you light up when a customer compliments your pastries, every time we work together and everything just flows, I know this is what I want to do with my life. And if it doesn't work out, if we lose money or the partnership goes bad, then at least we'll have tried," Marcus said. "Sarah, I've spent my whole life playing it safe, taking the secure option. But being here with you has made me realize that the biggest risk is not taking any risks at all." I was quiet for a long moment, weighing the pros and cons. The practical side of my brain was screaming warnings about the dangers of mixing family and business, about the financial risks of expansion, about the possibility of losing everything I'd worked so hard to build. But there was another voice, quieter but more insistent, that reminded me of the promise I'd made to a 3-year-old boy 21 years ago. I'd promised to take care of him, to make us a family again. Maybe this was how I could finally keep that promise. "I have conditions," I said finally. Marcus sat up straighter. "Of course, whatever you need. First, we start small. Maybe we just expand the seating area and add a simple lunch menu. See how that goes before we commit to full dinner service." "Agreed." "Second, I want everything in writing. Partnership agreement, profit sharing, decision-making processes. I know we're family, but business is business." "Absolutely." "Third, and this is the most important one, If this doesn't work out, if we discover we can't work together, we promise to talk about it honestly. No passive-aggressive behavior, no letting resentment build up. We deal with problems head on. Deal, Marcus said, extending his hand. Partners? I looked at his outstretched hand, then at his face, bright with hope and excitement. This was terrifying and exhilarating and completely different from anything I'd ever imagined for my life. Partners, I said, shaking his hand. Marcus pulled me into a hug, and I felt tears pricking at my eyes. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for giving me a chance to be part of something with you. Thank you for finding me, I whispered back, for not giving up on us. The next morning, I woke up with a mixture of excitement and terror churning in my stomach. I'd barely slept, my mind racing with possibilities and concerns in equal measure. But as I made my way downstairs to start the morning baking, I found Marcus already there, measuring flour and humming softly to himself. Couldn't sleep either? I asked. Too excited, he admitted. I kept thinking about that bread pudding idea. What if we made it with your cinnamon rolls instead of regular bread? That's not a bad idea, I said, surprised by how quickly my mind jumped to the practical considerations. We'd need to adjust the custard recipe, maybe add some vanilla bean. And we could serve it with a salted caramel sauce, Marcus added, his eyes lighting up. Something rich enough to balance the sweetness. Wait, I said, holding up a hand. Are we actually doing this? Are we really going to expand Sweet Memories? Marcus grinned. I think we are. I called the landlord this morning. The space next door will be available next month, and I have a meeting with the bank this afternoon to discuss a loan. You work fast, I said, impressed despite myself. I've been planning this for weeks, Marcus admitted. I was just waiting for you to say yes. As we worked together that morning, preparing the day's pastries and discussing plans for the expansion, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, genuine excitement about the future. For so long, my life had been about survival, about maintaining the status quo. But now, with Marcus by my side, it felt like anything was possible. You know what the best part is? Marcus said, as we arranged croissants in the display case. What? We're not just keeping your promise from that letter anymore. We're making new ones. I smiled, thinking about the 11-year-old girl who'd written that letter, desperate to give her little brother something to hold on to. She'd promised to take care of him, to open a bakery, to make them a family again. She'd had no idea that 21 years later, her little brother would be the one taking care of her, helping her dreams grow bigger than she'd ever imagined. New promises, I agreed. I liked the sound of that. As the first customers of the day began to arrive, I caught Marcus's eye across the bakery. He was smiling as he handed Mrs. Patterson her usual order, and I could see the contentment in his face. This was what family looked like. Not just love, but partnership, shared dreams, and the willingness to take risks together. The secret ingredient had never been just love, I realized. It had been faith. Faith that despite all the obstacles, all the years of separation, all the reasons it shouldn't work, we could still find our way back to each other and build something beautiful together. 6 months later, I stood in the expanded Sweet Memories, watching Marcus train our new afternoon shift manager, Jennifer, on the proper technique for steaming milk. The space looked completely different now. We'd knocked through the wall to the neighboring unit, added a full kitchen, and created a warm, inviting dining area with exposed brick walls and Edison bulb lighting. The key is to keep the steam wand just below the surface, Marcus was explaining to Jennifer, a recent culinary school graduate who'd been thrilled to join our team. You want to create microfoam, not just hot milk. I smiled, remembering when I'd given Marcus the same lesson just months ago. Now he was the one teaching, and I couldn't have been prouder. Sarah, called out David Chen, no relation, despite the shared last name, from behind the lunch counter. We need 2 more of the turkey and brie paninis, and Mrs. Patterson is asking if we have any of those lavender shortbread cookies. Tell her I always save her a dozen, I called back, laughing. Some things never changed, and I was grateful for that consistency in the midst of all the exciting chaos. The expansion had been more successful than either Marcus or I had dared to hope. Our lunch service was booked solid most days, and our weekend brunch had become so popular that we were taking reservations 2 weeks in advance. The dinner service we'd finally added in March was drawing food bloggers and local critics, with one reviewer calling our elevated comfort food the perfect blend of nostalgia and innovation. But the real magic happened in the quiet moments between the rush, when Marcus and I would catch each other's eyes across the bustling kitchen and share a smile that said everything. We did this. Together. "Sarah, there's someone here to see you," Jennifer called out from the front counter. I looked up from the batch of sourdough I was kneading to see a familiar figure standing near the entrance. Maria Rodriguez was there, but she wasn't alone. A tall man with graying hair and kind eyes stood beside her, and I recognized him immediately from the photos Marcus had shown me. David Rodriguez, Marcus's adoptive father. "Maria," I called out, wiping my hands on my apron as I hurried over to greet them. "David, what a wonderful surprise!" Maria pulled me into one of her warm hugs, while David shook my hand with a firm grip and a genuine smile. "We wanted to see this famous expansion we've been hearing so much about," David said, his voice carrying the same warmth I'd heard in Marcus's stories. "Maria's been talking about visiting for months. Where's Marcus?" Maria asked, looking around the busy restaurant. "In the back kitchen, prepping for tonight's dinner service," I said. "Marcus," I called out, "you have visitors." The sound of running feet preceded Marcus's appearance, and his face lit up when he saw his parents. He rushed over, still wearing his chef's coat, and pulled them both into a group hug. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice full of joy. "I thought you couldn't get away from school until summer break." "I may have told the principal that I had a family emergency," David said with a mischievous grin. "Technically, I needed to see if my son was as happy as he claimed to be in his letters." "And?" Marcus asked, gesturing around the bustling restaurant. "I've never seen you glow like this," Maria said, tears in her eyes. "Mijo, you've found your calling." As I watched the three of them together, I felt a familiar pang of gratitude mixed with something that had taken me months to identify: security. For so long, I'd been afraid that Marcus's relationship with his adoptive parents would somehow diminish our bond. But seeing them together now, I understood that love wasn't a finite resource. The more people who loved Marcus, the more love there was to go around. "Come on," I said, taking Maria's arm. "Let me give you the full tour." We walked through the dining area, with its mismatched vintage chairs and tables that Marcus had found at estate sales. He'd convinced me that the eclectic look was more inviting than matching furniture, and as usual, he'd been right. "This is beautiful," David said, admiring the chalkboard menu that featured our daily specials. "It feels like a real community gathering place." "That was the goal," Marcus said, his pride evident. "Sarah always said that food should bring people together, and I think we've created something special here." As we moved into the kitchen, I watched Maria and David take in the organized chaos of dinner prep. Our sous chef, Tony, was working on the evening's special, a short rib ragout with house-made pappardelle, while Marcus checked on the bread rising in the proofing baskets. "This is incredible," Maria said, running her hand along the stainless steel prep counter. "You two have built something amazing." "We've had a lot of help," I said, glancing at Marcus. "And we've learned that the secret to success isn't just hard work, it's finding the right people to work with." "Speaking of which," Marcus said, suddenly looking nervous, "I have something to tell you both." My heart skipped a beat. Marcus had been acting strange for the past few days, taking mysterious phone calls and disappearing for long meetings he wouldn't explain. I'd started to worry that he was having second thoughts about the partnership. "What is it?" Maria asked, her motherly instincts clearly picking up on his nervous energy. "Well," Marcus said, running his hands through his hair, "I've been working on a surprise. Sarah, remember how you always said you wished you could give back to kids in foster care?" I nodded, wondering where this was going. "I've been talking to the county social services department, and they're interested in partnering with us for a program. We could offer cooking classes for teenagers, aging out of foster care, teach them job skills, maybe even provide internships here at the restaurant." My mouth fell open. "Marcus, that's incredible. But how did you even know to pursue that?" "Because I know you," he said simply. "I know that success doesn't mean anything to you unless you can share it with others. And I know that every time you see a story about kids in foster care, you get that look in your eyes. The same look you had when you were 11 and trying to figure out how to take care of me. Tears were streaming down my face now, and I didn't care who saw them. You did this for me? I did this for us, Marcus corrected. And for kids like we used to be. Kids who need someone to believe in them, to teach them that they have value beyond their circumstances. Maria and David were both crying now too, and I realized that this was what family looked like. Not just loving each other, but inspiring each other to become better versions of themselves. There's more, Marcus continued, his voice shaking with emotion. I've been in touch with some of the other kids from our original foster placement. Do you remember Jennifer and Michael Thompson? They were with us at the Hendersons' house. I gasped. The twins? But they were so young. They're 26 now, and they've both done really well for themselves. Jennifer is a social worker, and Michael is a teacher. They want to help with the program. You found them? I whispered. I found them because they were looking for us too, Marcus said. It turns out we weren't the only ones who remembered that time as something special. We weren't the only ones who believed in the idea of chosen family. The implications of what Marcus was saying hit me like a tidal wave. He hadn't just found me. He'd found a way to reconstruct the family we'd lost, to create something even bigger and more meaningful than what we'd had before. When? I managed to ask. They're coming next week, Marcus said. Jennifer is taking vacation time, and Michael has spring break. They want to see what we've built, and they want to be part of the program. I looked around the kitchen, at the restaurant we'd created together, at Maria and David who'd welcomed me into their family without question, at Marcus who'd never stopped believing in the power of connection and love. You know what this means? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. What? It means we're not just keeping the promise from that letter anymore. We're making it bigger. We're promising to be family not just to each other, but to kids who need what we needed. Marcus grinned, and I saw the little boy I'd once known overlaid with the confident man he'd become. I was hoping you'd say that. Actually, I said, an idea forming in my mind. I have a surprise too. I walked over to the office area tucked behind the kitchen and pulled out a manila folder I'd been keeping hidden for weeks. Inside were architectural drawings, permit applications, and a lease agreement. What is this? Marcus asked, taking the folder. The building across the street is going up for sale, I said, watching his eyes widen as he flipped through the papers. It's perfect for what you're talking about, big enough for teaching kitchens, classroom space, even a small cafe where the kids could get real-world experience. Sarah, this is huge, Marcus said, his voice filled with awe. How long have you been planning this? Since the day you told me you wanted to stay in Portland, I admitted. I started researching programs for at-risk youth, and I realized that what we have here, this sense of belonging, of being part of something bigger than ourselves, that's what every kid deserves. Maria stepped forward and pulled both of us into a hug. You too, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You've turned your pain into purpose. You've taken everything that was broken about your childhood and used it to build something beautiful. We learned from the best, Marcus said, looking at his adoptive parents with obvious love. You taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about showing up for each other, every single day. As we stood there in the kitchen of sweet memories, surrounded by the controlled chaos of dinner service and the warmth of family, I realized that the scared 11-year-old who'd written that letter could never have imagined this moment. She'd promised to take care of her little brother, to open a bakery, to make them a family again. She'd kept every promise and then some. But more than that, she'd learned that the best promises aren't the ones you make to hold on to the past. They're the ones you make to build a better future. The letter I'd written 21 years ago had been about survival, about hope in the face of loss. The promises we were making now were about transformation, about taking the love we'd been given and multiplying it, sharing it with anyone who needed it. So, I said, looking at Marcus, at Maria and David, at the bustling restaurant around us, what do we call this new program? How about Sweet Memories Kitchen? Marcus suggested. Because we're not just teaching cooking, we're helping kids create new memories to replace the painful ones, and showing them that their past doesn't have to define their future, I added. Perfect, Maria said, beaming at both of us. Absolutely perfect. As the evening dinner service began in earnest, and the restaurant filled with the sounds of conversation and laughter, I caught Marcus's eye across the kitchen. He was plating the evening's special, his movements confident and precise, but he paused to smile at me. A smile that contained 21 years of separation, 6 months of partnership, and a lifetime of possibilities ahead. I smiled back, then returned to my own tasks, feeling the familiar rhythm of our shared work. This was what I'd been searching for all those years without knowing it. Not just family, but purpose. Not just love, but the chance to pass that love on to others who needed it. The letter I'd written as a scared 11-year-old had been about promises. But this restaurant, this partnership, this program we were building, this was about legacy. We weren't just keeping old promises anymore. We were making new ones, bigger ones, promises that would ripple out into the world and touch lives we might never even know about. And that, I thought as I watched Marcus laugh with a customer while explaining the evening's dessert options, was the most beautiful promise of all. The secret ingredient had never been just love or even faith. It had been the willingness to believe that broken things could be made whole, that separated families could find their way back to each other, and that the sweetest memories were still ahead of us, waiting to be created. As I looked around Sweet Memories, our sweet memories, I knew that little girl would be proud of what we'd built. We'd kept her promise, and in doing so, we'd discovered that the best promises aren't about returning to the past. They're about creating a future worth believing in.